Melina, thank you for joining me on Inclusive Cyber. Super excited to get into your amazing career and background. But
Hey,
how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
If you can give a quick background, kind of your career journey from a macro perspective, I think that would be beneficial for the audience.
Sure. I guess my first professional position in IT was back in the 90s, and I was a database manager. Back then, understood a programming language, then you had a job. All of us wore many hats. After a short period of time, the supervisor said, you're in charge of the network. Then I became a network engineer, a network administrator first. We didn't call things cybersecurity back then, but I found out I loved it. There was just something about it. There were always new things to learn. It was challenging. There was very much a puzzle solving piece to it that I loved. Then I went on to secure data in international healthcare to network engineering. Then I went on to protect domestic health data. And that's when I met my first CISSP. And this is kind of all in the early aughts, if you
Yeah.
will. By that point, I was moving through another healthcare system with protecting federal healthcare data with the National Institutes of Health, and stayed there in some form or fashion with NIH for many years, securing federal health there. And then that grew. I just loved the language of cybersecurity. And turns out when you work for federal contractors, they really appreciate when you love the language of cybersecurity, because then you can write all of those winning proposals and so forth. I rose through the ranks again because I was, helping them to win more business, and that was rolled into my first CISO opportunity. I was CISO over maybe $3 billion worth of business across federal health. I was known very much as a problem solver and maybe fixer, when things started to go wrong. And we were very much into the business, and in those years, moving into, the 20 teens and so forth, of moving everything to the cloud and modernization efforts and getting off of all of that old legacy data. I did a couple of years in hospitality as a CISO, and changed over to kind of the Fortune 500 way of doing things. I really thought I was an odd choice for that because I had been a federal, you know, cybersecurity SME for so long. But it turns out we were fighting the same people whose day jobs would be attacking, U.S. agencies
Right.
from their nation state perspective. And then kind of their side hustle at night was ransomware as a service. Yeah, I've loved it. Now I'm on my own helping other CISOs, sitting on boards and, just trying to make a difference in cybersecurity as not only a good thing to do, but a part of the whole business risk that any organization needs to be thinking about, particularly in the governance and board level.
That's just an amazing background, Melina. So thank you for sharing that. And we're definitely going to go through all the different stages of your amazing career. And there's another thing I had to write down. You said the language of cyber. So I want to shelve that for now, and then just remind me that
So much to talk
to
about.
get back to
Yes,
that.
it's
Yeah.
changing. It's always changing. Yeah.
Yeah, but let's start at the very beginning. You said you started working in database. So walk me before that. What got you
Ugh,
interested in
money
technology, right? Oh, the money. Okay.
really was. I
Yeah.
was supposed to be a very famous opera singer, right? And so, and that didn't quite work out. I love it. I still sing,
Yeah.
but it always paid for lessons. Double majored in both the engineering side and in the opera side. Still opera is my heart. But yeah, I thought it was going to be a very temporary thing. I didn't think I would catch the bug at all.
Yeah.
And yes, I was cleaning up a database, a membership database. It was SQL. It was, old school stuff. And that was my first real paychecks and so forth. And I really didn't understand that, my background in Fortran and Turbo Pascal, these are all old languages, and
Yeah. Yeah.
transitioned very well into SQL. And if you knew how to run queries and so forth, you had a job back then. Slicing and dicing data, still do, in a different way now, in terms of seeing the metrics of cybersecurity and so forth. But back then, we were very customer focused. And I was very surprised when they said, here's the network, and these big blue kind of screens of Novell, learning all that. And I said, well, if you're willing to teach me, I'm willing to go to, a course. It turns out those things can be taught. And I loved it. So I did everything from soup to nuts as a network administrator and then as an
Mhm.
engineer.
No, I definitely love that. So, did you have a lot of, colleagues or friends that were going into the same space? I guess I'm just trying to understand your mindset to go into engineering.
I went to University of Maryland. I was a geek, and I definitely came from one of those
Yeah.
geeky high schools, where you got a technology like cert and everything. Because I always liked math, and
So you,
engineering kind of came naturally from that. I
yeah,
was super competitive also, and those were the hardest things back then. And I always
got
wanted
it.
to do that, and kind of came from a family of kind of scientists, teachers, and artists. So they kind of had that left brain, right brain thing going.
Yeah,
My friends at the time, we're a mixed bag, young moms, military families, old nerd friends. We couldn't believe that this stuff was cool now. It
yeah.
always seems so fringe in the late 80s, early 90s. And then all of a sudden, with the dot-com bubble, it became big business, a big deal.
Hmm.
Okay, we can ride that bubble. I mean, it was a lot of fun. Things changed very quickly, and I wouldn't have wanted to do anything else. I don't think if you take this span of time from maybe like 1995 to from 2020 2025, what else has changed so much, evolved so much, changed the lifestyle of every American so much as IT and my little pocket of cybersecurity. I don't know where else I would have wanted to be. You can't see that at the time. People have
Right.
asked, what would you tell your younger self, kind of thing, if you could tell your 20-year-old self something. And I would say this thing called cybersecurity is going to be really big.
No, I appreciate you kind of walking me through memory lane. And I just want to share that with the audience because I think a lot of people that reach out to me, they're like, well, how do I get into cyber? How do I do that? There's no quote unquote traditional path, and everybody's path is unique. But your path, if I would label it as this, it's more of that traditional technical background, right? But then you added your curiosity, your passion to learn and keep on learning. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Melina. So
And there were no
yeah,
if you were willing to say yes, there were so many opportunities in IT that you can move ahead very quickly. There just were not enough people, to do the job that business needed, the government needed, yeah, and so forth. I would argue that in the next 20 or 30 years, it might not be IT cybersecurity per se. It might be more along the lines of AI.
okay. Yeah, that's definitely fair. And we'll go down the rabbit hole of AI later on in the
Yeah.
episode. So you're a database engineer. Now you switch to networking. During that transition, you were learning a lot. Did you have any mentors along that process? And if you did, how did you initially obtain them? How did you get those mentors?
I think it was vendors, because it takes a village, right, to keep even a small office, and you just talk to people. They couldn't wait to tell you, what their last job was or what they were doing next, and I just found it to be a very welcoming um, niche group of folks that wanted to talk about what the challenges were, how there were a lot of frustrations, of course, certainly back then, and how you solved problems, and maybe they could use the same kind of techniques to solve their problems. A very generous group, to be honest. Nobody was gatekeeping at all. It just wasn't really in them. I think, it was very social scene. This was in, DC and like the late 90s. And,
Yeah.
you just kind of sat down and had a beverage with somebody and you got new skills, got new ideas. And it was all very friendly and generous. And there was no gatekeeping that I recall.
And I think, sharing and networking, I think is key. Just like, back during those times, and especially now, where we have technology to makes it a little bit easier now. Instead of just being in your, city, now you can start reaching out to people globally on
Right.
topics, X, Y, and Z.
This is
So I,
before Reddit and even
yeah,
iPhones
yeah.
and all that. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. No, so it definitely makes sense there. So one question for you, if somebody reached out to you and asked, how do I find a mentor in our space? What advice would you give them?
Just ask, reach out. I've gotten a lot of mentees just from LinkedIn kind of thing.
Yeah.
I tell all of my, family and friends, check in with your people and see who's doing what. If you feel like you're on an island, I would say there's so many great groups like Women in Technology, Insight, um, Girls Who Code, ISACA groups like in your area and so forth. So many. Certainly at schools, if you happen to be of college age and are taking classes. There's so many resources here at our local community college, as well as our local 4 years here in Maryland. So I'm pointing in the direction of the two colleges. But yeah, just reach out and ask. There's always something going on. We host a lot of hackathons that if you want to
Yeah.
do those kinds of challenges, there's always a hackathon kind of going on and pick up groups and that type of thing. So that's another way to get into it. Take a cert class and you'll have people recruiting you right out of that class uh, to get a job. So I think there are plenty of avenues.
Yeah, I know that's great advice, Melina. So as you were progressing, further into your career, kind of my personal take, I don't know who would want to be a CISO in this day and age, just because the the complexities, and maybe looking at it from more Fortune 500 big global corporations there. So what made you, was it just a normal trajectory as you're advancing from role to role, that okay, well, the next role is eventually going to be the CISO,
Not at
or
all.
did you plan
Not
it?
at all. I mean, and not in my mind at all.
Yeah.
I think the first time I was approached, I was leading a team of um, cybersecurity SMEs and especially in federal programs, they get into FTEs. Well, how many full-time employees, are under you kind of thing, and you kind of build your whole world, if you will. But no, I really didn't wasn't like chasing a title or anything like
Yeah.
that. I just wanted to get to the next thing. Give me more. Like give me, uh, how how can I help this company more? And then that just became the thing. I think the influence from where I came from was really more about writing. What was your P win, and yeah, which was kind of like a percentage win of the things that you were writing, and then it really became personal. It's like if you're writing a recompete, for instance, for families that cybersecurity pros that you've been working with for years, you're really motivated to make sure that that language is great and that these families, can keep their work, their homes, their salaries, and so forth.
Yeah.
So I think the people made it special for me, not so much the title. it is definitely exciting, I think once you have that title. But no, that first CISO position came from having a glass of wine with another woman who was doing the same type of thing that I was doing when two companies merged together. And she heard, "Hey, I think you're the me over there." And I said, "Yeah, I heard that you're the me over there. Why don't we get together and see if, we can talk about what your programs are, any language, what are you seeing out there?" And we could
Yeah.
have talked all night. We're very aligned in both what we're seeing and what we thought the future was for innovative cybersecurity and what the our federal customers, needed. What attacks we were the least prepared for and how we could prepare better for those
Hmm.
attacks. And we could have gone on all night. And in fact, she was the one that was asked to take this role. I didn't even know about it. I was on vacation,
Yeah.
and she ended up accepting another role. And they came to her and said, "Well, what are we going to do now?" And she said, "Call Melina. She thinks just like I do.
Yeah.
She's ready for the position." And it just grew from there. And I was thrilled to have it, thrilled to have kind of a bigger impact, and of course, more contracts, more responsibility, and it was great.
And I know, I guess your experience within the federal side versus kind of the private sector side, was there differences between the CISO role?
Well, for sure. Particularly in the process of getting that role, in terms of they would like for you to talk to all of the VPs across the board, because those are the folks that you're really going to need to collaborate with. In terms of the vetting, there was a lot of kind of psychological examinations to make sure that you were kind of the right fit, and a lot of background checking and so forth, from a board level to make sure you're, an appropriate, you're a good egg, I guess.
Right.
You could
That you
stand the
don't have
scrutiny of
skeletons in the
an
closet type of thing,
average,
right?
yeah, stakeholder, that type of thing. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, it was very much more serious, right? But I think people get a little bit sidelined about, um, the money, like how much are you protecting, that kind of thing. Keep it simple, make sure that you're starting with the basic rules of good cyber hygiene in your organization, and then take it from there. Those rules are immutable, and they will not generally change over time. And then you can get, kind of fancier with all of the commercial applications that you're putting out there and so forth. But again, the attackers, the cyber criminals are the same. The from a scientific perspective, all of those indicators of compromise, are the same throughout. The job in terms of, strengthening cybersecurity posture, reducing cybersecurity risk are the same. The language was very different, for sure. All of that. Um, there's a whole language of federal contracting that was not present in the Fortune 500 world. And by the same token, there's a whole language in the
Vice
Fortune
versa.
500 world that does not translate exactly into um, federal side. But I think once you made that kind of cross connection, that business risk is, or cyber risk is business risk, then it was a lot easier to communicate. Um, on the Fortune 500 side, it was easy to go down a rabbit hole and perhaps get too technical. Whereas they really wanted the highlights and how this translates into um, stock price and business risk and cyber insurance, that type of thing. Especially when
Yeah.
it came to mergers and acquisitions, that was a whole different thing that I really had to learn the language of quickly, because we no longer have one system. We have systems of systems. And every time, they grow with a merger and acquisition or, whatever of a small software,
Hmm.
for instance, um, we have to say, well, what is that going to do to our cyber posture? How are you, securing all that data? And what's going to happen when we start pumping our customer data into that kind of third party downstream? Um, and from my experience, when you get to the table for all these, you have like a group of lawyers really trying to reduce their liability on side, and then
Hmm.
you'll also have kind of a group of technical folks or CISOs from the other side getting together and trying to water down your cybersecurity policies so that that the least amount of accountability is on their downstream. And so you really have to be
Right.
um, very astute with the language of these contracts, these MSAs, and so forth.
Yeah. No, thank you for explaining that the cyber language, because it intrigued me initially when you said it, because I think in my experience, we tend to be super technically focused, and we're not able to communicate with the business side, right?
Yeah,
So we're
I mean,
we're kind of on opposite levels, if that makes sense. And being able to frame it, like you said, it's a business risk, not a cyber risk. And you have to frame it under the, kind of a business terminology or language, because I'm seeing a lot of that where there are super smart technical folks, but they can't translate their information to somebody who's not, and they're looking for that business perspective.
absolutely. And I've had varying levels of success, to be
Yeah.
honest, in that realm. And one colleague that I work with actually had a rabbit that she would use as a pneumatic device. When somebody was starting to go down the rabbit hole, she'd kind of whoop up. Wonderful person. But in any case,
Yeah.
it's such an easy thing to do because that's what got you here, right? That great technical knowledge and putting all of those controls and systems and really understanding, that SE Linux is something that you have to, you know, configure, uh,
Yeah.
and not just put in permissive mode. And if out there, but in any case, that is not something I would pop off at a board meeting, right? Because that would not be appreciated. But I do appreciate our metrics. And so you've got to choose metrics that matter. You've got to make sure that you are measuring the right things and have some anticipation of the attacks that are going to come and how you are going to protect your organization from those attacks to come.
Yeah. No, Melina, thank you for kind of going down my rabbit hole. And I know we're going a little off script, but I just really want to get into the mind of a CISO, right? That particular role is so, there's so much accountability and responsibility, that how just trying to understand the management of it, but then also the business side of it. But one thing I wanted to ask you, and this is, I would love to get your opinion. This is what I tell folks that reach out to me, that, whatever got you to whatever position that you're at, from primarily technical, will not allow you to succeed at that level or help you advance. Well, what do you think about that statement?
I think that's been proven true in my career for sure. Um, and part of it is, um, just this feeling of bringing old things into a new environment. If you can kind of go in with a childlike curiosity about the new environment, because nobody knows the environment better than the people who have been working. Digital footprint is, nobody knows it better than you. And so I would say my advice would be the first thing that you do, first 90 days, talk to everyone. Ask them, what would you change if you were here? What's going really well? What is concerned about? What frustrates you the most? I think that that tends to elicit a lot of conversation because folks love to complain, about what's not working, particularly if
Right.
they've had a great idea that they felt was sidelined, kind of thing. That is very near and dear to their heart. Or, tell me what you studied in school or something that you would, really like to dig into from like a research and development side of things. Maybe we can, help you get a patent or, something like that. You really have to, I also try to seek what motivates people because a lot of a CISO's job has nothing to do with cybersecurity and
Yes.
everything to do with, taking care of your people, particularly for cybersecurity, I will say, because cyber warfare is warfare and these folks are on the front line. And uh, there's a lot of emotional baggage that comes with that, feeling the weight of the responsibility of all of these hits every day, and only one of them has to be right and all the things, particularly for incident response teams. I think my mantra has always been, we create our reputation every day, not just in one, event that happens. And we
Yeah.
have to make sure as leaders across the board, particularly incident response leaders and cybersecurity leaders, that we have some scale. I think every incident response team has that superstar, for instance, right? But uh, when when that big event happens, you can't expect that superstar to be on deck for 48 hours flat. As these things,
Right.
you have to have some back reach. You have to have the contracts in place that you can, uh, make the call in the reserves, if you will, if you need it. You have to have positive communications and you have to let, your upstream know at 6 a.m., every day during this kind of incident that we don't know how long it's going to go, right?
Right.
You will get, you know, the email from whoever. And then at noon, legal will get an email and that, all the things so that you aren't inundated with just time sucks. Um, I think that was a really big part. You don't realize how important communication is, both within your team and across the organization.
Right.
Um, and then two, I think that when it comes to making sure that people feel heard and, I don't know, making sure that um, everyone on the team is getting what they need in those kind of initial interviews that you have with people. It is
Yeah.
it is so easy to burn out in cybersecurity that
Really
it's
is.
really, particularly, the superstars, but just everybody. Are you taking care of your folks? Are they getting their PTO? Is there some other reason why, other than preference, that they're hoarding it for some reason? Is there some fear that, that it is not being talked about? I never want people to feel like they have to work all weekend and we very careful not to reach out to people. I mean, unless there was an ongoing incident, and you happen to be incident response, but we weren't going to have meetings on Friday afternoons. That not that you shouldn't be working, but that's really a great time to do your planning for the week ahead, and your any documentation that during the week when you're in the thick of it you don't have time to do. We made sure that
Right.
we put that in because if you don't bank those hours for that type of documentation, you're forcing your cybersecurity staff to do it after hours or on the weekend. And that's not right. That's not fair. That's a sure way to burn people out. So I think really, I don't know if you would call that staff management or time management, but really making sure that folks have ways to say, there's too much on my plate. First of all, and being comfortable to come to you and
Right.
building in kind of processes and time so that if the week gets away from them, there's a space where they can take a breath, take a class, take a training. Friday afternoons, are your own, and I will not try to bother you during that time.
Yeah.
then come back fresh on Mondays.
Everything that you said, Melina, I definitely agree with you. And I think it kind of shows your leadership style. And it's all about taking care of the people that you're leading, right? And making sure that their mental health, because I think there was one, it just kind of reminded me, I went to a training that it was, I think, a question posed by the instructor. What is more important, the mission or people? And there was a group of people that put mission in front and another group of people. I fell into the people. I'm like, how can you have a mission if you don't have any people? So I think everything you're saying, I definitely agree. And you kind of answered one of my follow-up questions about
Okay.
advice on new CISOs or people wanting to get into this space, how they should approach it and what they should do. And I think your advice was to listen, right? To those first 90 days, listen to what everybody's saying, how would they do it? So I think that's definitely great advice. Melina, I think I could talk to you for hours on your role as a CISO and as a leader, but let's transition to generative artificial intelligence. I'm kind of tired of saying that word nowadays. I'm kind
Okay.
of over it. But so kind of a two-part question. From a macro perspective, do you think Gen AI is good or bad for society based on your experience? And then more on the micro, is it good or bad for cybersecurity and IT?
Sure. It's convenient. It sure is a time saver. And so from
Yeah,
that perspective, I would say it's good. Um, uh, from the perspective of being, a woman, it's bias. And so that's a problem for getting jobs because, turns out that there is such a strong gender bias that if I call myself Mark Scotto at the top of my resume and change nothing else, I will see many more interviews than I will as Melina Scotto. So there are ways to reduce that, and I speak around the world about that, and making sure that not just gender parity but cultural parity and so forth are being maintained. And I think it is getting better. I will say that in general, it's a great time saver, and I can see why businesses and even the federal government now are embracing it. From a cybersecurity perspective, it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? It's akin to the script kiddies kind of the years past, having a very easy path to attacks. You don't have to know too much about cybersecurity when you can crack these generative AI systems pretty easily, and say, don't follow the guardrails anymore, and I'm looking for
right.
for thus and such. I think it puts you in a lot of risk in ways that we don't always appreciate. Someone, maybe a line staffer, for instance, in a SOC, wants to see if this log, for instance, is an indicator of compromise. So with the very best of intentions, they throw it up on, something. Um, the trouble is that the nature of this exchange that you're having with this
Yeah,
product is that the very next time somebody asks me, about, um, you know, um, Acme, uh, for instance, I'm going to pull up that data, and that data might have given away more than you thought, right? Maybe your
mm,
naming conventions, maybe the operating system that you're using. And now I'm collecting data, if I want to, from my own nefarious,
right.
Danny and Melina's ransomware as a service, company, right? So,
Yeah,
so I think that it's a wonderful way for data leaks to happen. If I, am a nefarious type hacker, it's a great way for me to get lots of information on how to hack your systems. Do I think it's all bad for cybersecurity? Not at all. I think it's going to take AI to um, kind of attack AI types of um, cyber criminals? Yeah, because we're going to need to be faster, stronger, better in our cybersecurity tech stack in order to meet the challenges of, faster, stronger, better attackers.
I want to kind of pull the thread on the first part of your answer about the biases, and as we've been seeing, kind of Silicon Valley, they're paying enormous amounts of money for talent so they can build up their AI shops. And the ethos of Silicon Valley is go fast and break things. So you said that you're seeing steps to kind of limit that bias, the cultural bias. Just kind of curious how what have you seen? Because I'm in the outside. Obviously, we're near Silicon Valley, but the way I see it, it's like this train is like a light speed train because of all that money, and we're not going to stop. And I'm not talking about even regulations. That's another thing. But how do we make sure that these 4 or 5 males that are running these companies take into account that cultural bias, take into account the biases that their models are collecting from society to prevent, harm and be a little bit more equitable for not only people here in this country, but globally?
Right. Well, I'm so glad you asked that question because there are actual assessments that you can run that are well known to measure how much cultural bias you have in your environment,
Interesting.
particularly if you are building it yourself, which I recommend, to people instead of using kind of the canned ones that are out there. I recommend
Yeah.
that to all businesses so that you own what is in there and you're not pumping a downstream, for instance, that you have no control over. That's a very different product, than making it yourself. Uh, with, for instance, if I were writing proposals, right, I would use all of the old proposal language that I have had, rather than, and then I own that, and that's not something that can kind of get out there into the greater community because I built my own engine kind of thing. So I would definitely recommend that. If you're going to go all in with AI from a corporate perspective, make sure that you own the whole downstream and you're building out for that. And I know that's not terribly popular with the big Valley folks, but
Right.
I just think you have more control over it. Certainly from a cybersecurity perspective, I know how it's controlled. But from any perspective, maybe you get a COTS product, right? Then take a look at an assessment, see how biased it is, and you are in charge of the training sets and so forth, and you can make sure that, both with your purchasing power, that you're purchasing the ones that have the least amount of bias, least amount of hallucinations. I mean, there are other bad things, right? Um,
Right. Right.
and um, uh, and certainly if you're building it yourself, make sure that there are metrics so that you're accountable to your board. Who are we as an organization and what are we promoting? Sure, we want to be part of this big AI wave, but how we do it is as important as that we.
Yeah. No, everything you said definitely makes sense there, Melina. So, other questions that I get from folks that reach out to me on LinkedIn is, will AI take over my job? How would you answer that question?
I think there are some jobs for sure, that even now I'm seeing less FTEs for the frontline SOC type positions because we can automate, a lot of that, or that is the promise, right? That we can automate. If that's true, we're very early stages still, so I'm not
Yeah.
sure if that's necessarily true. I would say, yeah, it's going to make it harder for those entry level positions, and that's why I wonder if I had a autistic, niece or nephew, where in the past 10 or 15 years, I would say, as your backup plan, uh, get a certificate in cybersecurity. Now I tell people, go to Oracle, get a certificate in AI. It is free. It's, do it. It costs absolutely nothing. It's wonderful training.
Hmm. Yeah, I think I remember you talking about that during
Yeah.
our
Yeah,
pre-call.
and
So,
that's just that's just one of them, but there are others out there, but that's also along the lines that the lane that I kind of swim a little more in, which is,
yeah,
then you're working in Python, you're really doing a little bit more coding, and what's going on with your training sets, and you can make them adhere to what you're comfortable with in terms of bias.
yeah. No, appreciate that. So, a couple of questions. I know we're coming up here up on time. So, what has surprised you the most being in our industry?
The willingness for folks to ignore the basics, vulnerability management, basic stuff that and configuration baselines that we still get wrong. I just
Yeah.
that bothers me.
Why do you think that's?
That we're still fighting that. You
Yeah.
know,
Why do you think that's the case, though, Melina?
it's not terribly sparkly and dazzly or innovative, is it? I mean,
Yeah.
was just solid brushing your teeth kind of stuff, and it never goes away, and so it can be
Yeah.
frustrating. We spoke about burnout for the front line because it's not like
Right.
the vulnerabilities ever go away. It's just that kind of new ones come up. So I think that that's part of it. That conveyor belt never stops. Um, so perhaps that's part of it. Um, and what else has surprised me? Mm, the hand waving. I mean,
Explain.
I don't, I don't understand how people can hand wave risk. You talked about some of the challenges of being a CISO, and I've been very lucky. And so this isn't necessarily from personal experience,
Yeah.
but um, if you're in a position as a CISO and you're doing your job and saying, here's the risk, it's critical, or whatever the case may be. And if the organization says, okay, we're going to accept that, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, you can't hand wave it away. We at least have to, I don't know what, put it, you know, uh, somehow mitigate it with some cyber insurance, which is not the greatest. Or in the federal space, they would have a waiver and you'd have compensating controls and, all the things, but that won't really protect you from a cyber criminal. That might protect you on paper, as it were, but you're still setting yourself up for a pretty bad day if you're willing to hand wave things. And this would particularly hear stories about this when companies wanted to lean forward, be very innovative, and so forth. But there are other ways to
Yeah.
do that. Speed up your assessment process so that they're really getting a true assessment. We can't just hand wave things and put them into production and hope for the best.
Right.
That really surprises me. That even still, you'll see that sometimes.
So, throughout your career and just an amazing career there, what challenges? And maybe you already answered that question there, and so I'm going to try to rephrase it. So, what were the biggest challenges early on in your career versus the challenges now, or are they the same, like you just explained?
Mm, I don't think they're the same. I think the challenges and the early career were kind of to be taken seriously. You're young and so forth, and you have something to
Yeah.
contribute, and you really want to be heard, if you will. Over time, when you've built up the resume and everything, and have all of these lovely titles, I don't think it's as much about being heard. People want to hear what you want to say, but I think the challenge becomes: do I have something new to say? Do I have something to contribute that is impactful to this audience, or to the business, or uh,
Yeah.
to my to my fellow cybersecurity professionals. What is the quality of what I'm saying? And is it going to change a life?
Definitely appreciate that response. We're coming up to a close here, Melina. And again, I could talk to you for hours. I definitely want to pick your brain more after the call. But so how I end every episode, and I got this from a podcast called Consulting Success, where the host always asks the individual that he's interviewing, what book, and now I've introduced what podcasts have you read or listened to that you want to share with the group that really resonated with you? And the good thing, it doesn't have to be related to our industry.
Well, I just finished Mel Robbins' book, Let Them. And I thought that was really powerful. You really
Yeah,
have no control about what other people are saying, particularly as a CISO, right? They're going to say what they're going to say. And particularly if they're hand waver types and they want to control the narrative because they can't control you anymore. Let
right.
them. You are going to do what you are going to do. You are going to keep going forward, and you can't let that bother you in any way. So I really appreciated her book and her take on that. It has so many applications, and
Yeah.
life as a parent, life as a CISO, life as, I mean, you have to be your own North Star, and that is so important. And my favorite podcast is Smashing Security. I just love that pod. I'm sure you've heard this before, but it
Yeah.
just cracks me up. I mean, there's so much humor in it, and yet everything is spot on from a technical perspective. I really appreciate that one.
Graham Cooley, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Terrio,
Yeah.
his partner in crime. Yeah, I love them too. So I listen to a lot of podcasts when I run. So yeah, they're hilarious. But I'm trying to kind of expand my podcast
Okay.
listening, because I think if we get out of our cybersecurity space, we could find solutions to our biggest challenges in other, other topics, other areas there. So
Wiser
I
Than
listen.
Me. I love that one.
I haven't
That's
haven't heard of
Julia
that one.
Louise Dreyfus. And
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, and she does interviews with women over 40, women over 50, and
Yeah.
it talks about their whole lives and what they would do differently, at this point in their life, knowing what they know, kind of thing.
Yeah. I'll make sure to include all the resources that you mentioned on the show notes. But Melina, this has been an amazing conversation. So thank you for taking the time
Danny.
for, this episode. And yeah, thank you for all the great advice.
Appreciate you. Thanks so much.